Businesswoman mistaken for a cleaner, and after being turned away, she fires everyone in 5 minutes. Tanya Williams arrived at the company that Monday with a heavy heart. At 58, she had built one of the largest business consulting firms in Los Angeles from scratch, but lately she felt something wasn't right in the environment she had created. It was when she arrived earlier than usual that she encountered a situation that would change her life forever. The new head of security, hired by her son without her knowledge, stopped her at the main entrance without even looking her in the eyes. "The service entrance is in the back," he said in a rough tone, pushing her away while other employees watched in awkward silence. The humiliation burned like embers in her chest, but Tanya kept her composure. After all, she had faced prejudice her entire life to get where she was. She decided to go through the back entrance, where the receptionist for general services treated her with the same disdain. "You'll have to wait here with the others," the young woman said, without even looking up from her phone, pointing to a bench where some cleaners were waiting. Tanya sat silently, observing everything around her. It was as if she was seeing her own company for the first time, through the eyes of those who actually worked there every day. What she saw and heard during those minutes of waiting shocked her deeply. "Did you see the new policy?" one cleaner whispered to another. "Now they only hire good-looking people for the offices." "I know," the other replied, lowering her voice even more. "My daughter tried for a receptionist position, but they said she didn't have the right look." Tanya felt her blood boil. What policy was this that she didn't know about? Who had authorized something like this in her company? Soon after, the HR manager appeared. Jennifer Parker, a 45-year-old woman who had recently been promoted by Tanya's son, looked at her with superiority. "You must be the new cleaner," she said, without even introducing herself. "I'll explain the rules for people like you. First, you can only use the service elevator. Second, you can't walk through the main halls during business hours. And third, no talking to the executives." Tanya took a deep breath. Her own HR manager didn't recognize her, even after years of working at the same company. But she decided to stay silent, wanting to see how far this would go. "One more thing," Jennifer continued. "You're not allowed in the executive cafeteria. There's a separate space for you in the basement, and don't use the bathrooms on the upper floors." Rage swelled in Tanya's chest. How had her company become a place like this? How had she allowed such segregation to happen right under her nose? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just starting. Now, back to the story. Finally, after an hour of humiliating waiting, Tanya stood up and walked to the main reception. Jennifer followed, thinking she was breaking the rules. "Hey you, where do you think you're going?" the manager shouted, drawing the attention of every employee nearby. That's when Tanya turned around, took her executive badge from her bag and pinned it to her chest. The silence that fell was deafening. Jennifer instantly turned pale, and all the nearby employees froze. "I'm Tanya Williams, president and founder of this company," she said in a firm but controlled voice. "And in 40 years of my career, I have never been more ashamed of what I've built." Panic swept through the room. Jennifer tried to explain, stammering apologies, but Tanya raised her hand demanding silence. "I want all employees in the main hall in 5 minutes, she ordered, addressing the receptionist. "And when I say all, I mean every single one." As people moved about nervously, Tanya went up to her office to process everything that had happened. Her personal assistant, Barbara, 62, waited for her with a worried expression. "Miss Tanya, what happened? Everyone's saying you came in through the service entrance," said Barbara, who had worked with her for over 15 years. "Barbara, tell me the truth. Did you know about these discriminatory policies happening here?" Tanya asked, sinking heavily into her chair. The assistant let out a deep sigh. "Ms. Tanya, I tried to talk to you several times, but Mr. Michael said they were just administrative adjustments and that I shouldn't bother you." Michael, her eldest son, 35, the company's vice president. Tanya felt her heart tighten. How could her own son implement policies like this without her knowledge? "Barbara, call Michael here now and bring me all the documents on these new policies." As she waited, Tanya looked out the window of her 20th floor office. She watched people moving through the streets, each with their own daily struggles, and thought about how many times she had faced similar situations early in her career. The difference was that now she had the power to do something about it. Michael arrived a few minutes later with a confident smile that quickly faded when he saw his mother's stern expression. "Mom, I heard there was a misunderstanding this morning. I already spoke to security and—" "Sit down, Michael," Tanya interrupted, pointing to the chair in front of her. "I want you to explain every single one of these policies you implemented without my authorization." Her son tried to justify himself, calling them measures to improve the corporate image and standardize the workplace. Every word out of his mouth cut deeper into Tanya's heart. "Are you telling me you segregated employees based on appearance?" she asked, disbelieving. "It's not segregation, Mom, it's organization. Important clients feel more comfortable when they see an environment that's more appropriate." "Appropriate for whom, Michael?" Tanya's voice rose. "Do you think I'm not appropriate for my own company?" The silence that followed was telling. Michael looked away, unable to respond. "Let's go down to the hall. I have some terminations to announce." The main hall was packed. Employees from every department crowded together, whispering nervously. Tanya stepped onto the small platform where she usually gave annual presentations, but this time, the atmosphere was entirely different. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice echoing through the room. "Today, I had an experience that changed my perspective on the company I've built over decades." The crowd was utterly silent. Tanya recounted in detail everything that had happened since her arrival. She saw expressions of shock, shame, and even some support among the employees. "Because of this, I'm announcing the following terminations, effective immediately," she said, pulling a sheet from her folder. "Douglas Parker, Head of Security for Discrimination and Disrespect. Jennifer Parker, HR Manager, for implementing discriminatory policies. And 7 more supervisors who actively participated in this segregation." A murmur spread through the hall. Some employees looked relieved, others worried about the consequences. "But I want to make one thing clear," Tanya continued. "The person primarily responsible for this situation is me, for allowing my company to become a place I no longer recognize." That was when a voice spoke up from the back of the hall. "Miss Tanya, may I speak?" It was Martha, a cleaning staff member who had worked there for 20 years. Tanya had known her since the beginning of the company, but they hadn't spoken in a while. "Of course, Martha, go ahead." The 67-year-old woman approached with shaky but determined steps. "Ms. Tanya, I wanted you to know that not everyone here agreed with these changes. Many of us suffered in silence, but we were afraid of losing our jobs." "Tell me, Martha, what else did you face?" Martha's words opened the floodgates. Other employees began speaking up, sharing stories of humiliation they had endured over the past few months. Tanya listened as they recounted being barred from using elevators, excluded from important meetings, and forbidden from eating in the same areas as executives. A young intern, black like Tanya, stepped forward in tears. "Ms. Tanya, I graduated top of my class in business administration, but when I got here, they told me I could only work in the archives, away from clients." Tanya's heart broke. How had she allowed her company to become such a place? "And the worst part," the young woman continued, "was when I tried to speak to Mr. Michael about it. He said it was for my own good, that clients wouldn't feel comfortable with me." Tanya looked at her son, his face red with shame. The disappointment she felt was indescribable. She had raised a son who perpetuated the same prejudices she had spent her life fighting. "Michael, do you have anything to say about this?" she asked, her voice trembling with restrained anger. "Mom, I thought I was protecting the company. Our important clients really do feel more comfortable when they don't see people like me," Tanya interrupted. "Is that what you're saying?" Her son couldn't respond. Shame was written all over his face. Just then, the company's lawyer, Ms. Patricia Wilson, hurried over. "Tanya, we need to talk urgently. These firings could lead to billion-dollar lawsuits." "Ms. Patricia, right now I care far more about what's right than about lawsuits." But you need to understand the consequences. Some of these employees have specific contracts, and terminations for cause could be challenged. Tanya took a deep breath. She knew the lawyer was legally correct, but morally she couldn't keep people who had fostered a discriminatory environment. Then we'll do it differently, she decided. I'll offer a re-education program for everyone involved. Those who refuse to participate or show no real change will be let go with full benefits. The proposal drew mixed reactions. Some employees looked hopeful, others were skeptical. But that doesn't fix the systemic problem, Martha said, still holding the microphone. Ms. Tanya, you need to know these policies were implemented because there are documents showing how money meant for social inclusion was diverted. A heavy silence fell over the room. Tanya felt as if she'd been punched in the gut. What documents, Martha? I've worked in cleaning for 20 years. I see things, I hear things. There are people here who redirected funds meant for inclusion programs and used them for other purposes. Tanya turned to the company accountant, Robert Johnson, who stood pale in the crowd. Robert Johnson, can you explain this? The 50-year-old man tried to hide among his colleagues, but was pushed forward. Ms. Tanya, I can explain everything later, in private. No, you'll explain here now in front of everyone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now, back to the story. Robert visibly trembled. He knew there was no way out. Ms. Tanya, some social projects were redirected, but it was to benefit the company, to improve our position in the market. Redirected where? To marketing campaigns, to renovations in the executive offices, to bonuses for some directors. The revelation caused an uproar in the room. Employees exchanged shocked glances, while Tanya felt the ground give way beneath her. How much money are we talking about, Robert Johnson? Over the last 3 years, about $2 million. The number echoed through the room like a bomb. $2 million that should have been used for inclusion programs, scholarships, professional training for underprivileged youth. And who else knew about this? Asked Tanya, her voice now dangerously calm. Robert Johnson nervously looked at several executives present. The entire board knew. It was a collective decision. Tanya felt her legs weaken. She had to lean on the podium to keep from falling. Her own board, people she trusted, had diverted funds meant for social causes. Including my daughter? She asked, looking at Rachel, her 28-year-old, who worked in the finance department. Rachel was silently crying. She nodded, unable to speak. Why, Rachel? Why didn't you tell me? I was scared, Mum. Scared you'd be disappointed in me. And everyone said it was better for the company that you didn't need to worry about these details. Tanya's heart shattered. Her own children had become part of a system she would never approve of. I want all the documents about these diversions on my desk in 1 hour, she ordered. And I want a full audit of all the company's accounts. That's when a group of people entered the room. Tanya recognized some faces. They were minority shareholders of the company. Tanya, we need to talk, said Richard Thompson, the group's representative. What's happening here is already leaked to the press. What do you mean leaked? Someone filmed part of the meeting and posted it on social media. Journalists are already calling for statements about racial discrimination in the company. Tanya closed her eyes. She knew the situation was spiraling out of control, but she couldn't turn back now. Richard, I take full responsibility for what happened here. I'll give all necessary explanations to the press. Tanya, you don't understand. This could destroy the company. Our clients are already canceling contracts. You need to do damage control. Damage control? Tanya's voice rose a pitch. The damage was done a long time ago. I'm just trying to fix it. That's not how business works, Tanya. You're being too emotional. The word emotional hit Tanya like a slap. How many times had she heard that during her career? How many times had men tried to undermine her decisions by calling them emotional? Richard, if doing what's right is being emotional, then I'd rather be emotional. Tanya, as the representative of the minority shareholders, I'm formally requesting an emergency board meeting to evaluate your position as CEO. The blow was direct. Tanya knew that despite founding the company, the minority shareholders had the power to remove her if they gained enough support. Fine, Richard. Schedule the meeting for tomorrow. I'll defend every one of my decisions. After the shareholders left, the room fell into tense silence. Tanya looked at all the employees present, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Everyone, I know today has been hard for all of you, but I want you to know that no matter what happens to me, I'll fight to make this company a better place. Miss Tanya, said Martha, still at the microphone, you can count on our support. Many of us always knew you weren't aware of what was happening here. Thank you, Martha. But support won't be enough. I'll need proof, documents, witnesses to show these policies were implemented without my knowledge. We can help with that, said Tyrone, a young black man who worked in the IT department. I have emails, meeting recordings, documents showing how these policies were put in place. You have recordings? Yes. I always recorded the meetings I attended as a way to protect myself. I have conversations with Mr. Michael explaining how to implement the employees' visual standards policies. Tanya felt a flicker of hope. Maybe it was still possible to save the company, and more importantly, transform it into what it should have always been. Tyrone, can you provide these recordings for the audit? Of course, Ms. Tanya, but there's something you need to know. These policies weren't just Mr. Michael's idea. What do you mean? There's someone else behind this, someone who's been pushing for the company to change its corporate image to attract more selective clients. Tanya shuddered. Who else could be involved in this? Tell me who it is, Tyrone. It's Mr. Stanley Porter. He attended board meetings as a consultant, but he was actually guiding these changes. Stanley Porter. The name struck Tanya like lightning. Stanley was her mentor, her friend of decades, a member of the company's board. He was the one who had helped her secure the first investments when no one believed in her potential. This can't be. Stanley has known me for 40 years. He knows where I came from, everything I went through to get here. Ms. Tanya, I have the recordings. Mr. Stanley said that women like you needed to understand that not all environments were suitable for certain people, even if they were competent. Tyrone's words echoed through the room like a verdict. Tanya felt her legs wobble again. Her own role model, the man she considered a father figure, was behind the discrimination in her company. Barbara, she called, her voice weaker. Call Stanley. Tell him I want to see him here today. Ms. Tanya, maybe you should rest a little before... No, Barbara. I need to settle this today. I need to hear it from him. While waiting for Stanley to arrive, Tanya retreated to her office. She needed to process everything she'd uncovered in just a few hours. Her company, her family, her role models, everything had crumbled. Rachel knocked on the door and entered, still crying. Mom, I need to talk to you. Rachel, I don't know if I have the strength for more revelations today. Mom, I know I was wrong. I know I should have told you about the financial discrepancies, but you need to know I argued against the discriminatory policies many times. And why didn't you come to me? Because Grandpa said you wouldn't understand, that you were too idealistic, and we needed to protect the company from your emotional decisions. Tanya froze. Grandpa. Rachel was referring to Walter Williams, her 78-year-old father, a silent shareholder in the company. Your grandfather is involved in this too. Mom, he was the one who suggested we hire Mr. Stanley as a consultant. He said you needed male guidance to make the right business decisions. Tanya's world completely collapsed. Her own father, the man who had raised her alone after her mother left, was behind everything. Rachel, call your grandfather here now. Mom, he's traveling. He won't be back until next week. Then call him. Tell him it's urgent. Half an hour later, Stanley Porter arrived at the office. At 65, he still carried the same elegant, confident demeanor as always. He greeted Tanya with a hug, as he had for decades. Tanya, my dear, I heard there were some problems today. I came as soon as I found out. Stanley, I need you to tell me the truth. Were you advising my children to implement discriminatory policies in the company? The man hesitated for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. Tanya, You know I've always had your best interests at heart. Sometimes adjustments are necessary to protect what we've built. Adjustments? You call racial discrimination adjustments? Tanya, you're being dramatic. This isn't about discrimination. It's about market alignment. Our clients have certain expectations. Expectations of not seeing people like me? Stanley sighed deeply. Tanya, you're the exception. You've succeeded, reached the top, but that doesn't mean everyone can or should be in every position. Stanley's words cut Tanya like a knife. The man she'd considered a father was revealing a side she'd never seen. Stanley, do you truly believe that? Tanya, I believe in efficient business, and sometimes that means making tough but necessary decisions. Tough? Stanley, you're talking about racial segregation. I'm talking about business strategy. You've always been too emotional to understand these nuances. Emotional. Again. Tanya realized she'd been naive all these years. Stanley had always dismissed her decisions as emotional simply because they clashed with his values. Stanley, I want you out of my company, now. Tanya, you're making a mistake. Without my guidance, you'll destroy everything we've built. We built nothing together. I built it, and you tried to shape it in your image. Tanya, think carefully. Tomorrow you'll face the board. You'll need allies. Without my support, you could lose everything. The threat was clear. Stanley was saying he'd vote against her at the board meeting. Stanley, if you vote against me tomorrow, our 40-year friendship ends today. Tanya, sometimes you must choose between friendship and business. You're forcing me to choose business. After Stanley left, Tanya stood alone in her office, processing the betrayal from the man she'd considered a father. Barbara entered with an envelope. Ms. Tanya, your personal assistant brought this. She said it's urgent. Tanya opened the envelope and found documents that changed everything. They were copies of emails between Stanley and competing companies discussing the purchase of her company after her inevitable departure. Barbara, where did these come from? Mr. Stanley's assistant brought them. She said she couldn't stay silent anymore about what he was doing. Tanya read the emails with growing outrage. Stanley hadn't just implemented discriminatory policies, he'd orchestrated her downfall to sell the company to competitors. Barbara, call the press. I'm holding a press conference today. Ms. Tanya, are you sure? This could make things worse. Barbara, if I'm going to lose my company, I'll at least lose it fighting for my values. 2 hours later, the company's hall was packed with journalists. Tanya had decided to tell the whole truth, holding nothing back. Good afternoon. I've called this press conference to clarify the facts about the discriminatory policies implemented in my company without my knowledge. For an hour, Tanya laid out the entire story. She showed documents of financial misconduct, played recordings Tyrone had provided, and revealed Stanley's plan to sell the company. I want to make it clear. I take full responsibility for allowing this to happen. As CEO, I should have been more attentive to what was happening in my company. Ms. Tanya, a reporter asked, do you plan to resign? I will not resign. I will fight to transform this company into what it should always have been, a place where merit is what matters, not skin color or social background. But what about the shareholders who want to remove you? Tomorrow I will face the board and defend every one of my decisions. If they remove me, so be it. But I won't submit to blackmail or accept that my company remains a place of discrimination. The interview immediately made waves. On social media, expressions of support for Tanya began to emerge. Employees from other companies reported similar situations, and the movement gained momentum. That night, Tanya was at home when she received a call from her father. Tanya, what kind of madness is this? You gave an interview bad-mouthing the whole family. Dad, do you really believe I was wrong? Tanya, you've always been rebellious, since you were little, wanting to change the world. But business doesn't work that way. Dad, you raised me alone. You taught me to fight for my rights. How can you now support discrimination? Tanya, I taught you to win. And sometimes to win, you have to accept certain rules. Rules that say people like me shouldn't be in certain positions. Tanya, you won. You proved you were capable. But that doesn't mean everyone can or should have the same opportunities. The conversation revealed that her father had changed over time. His daughter's success had made him forget where they came from, and he now repeated prejudices he once fought against. "Dad, tomorrow I'll face the board. Can I count on your support?" "Tanya, you're putting me in a tough spot. I have to think about the business, the company's future." "And what about your daughter's future?" "Tanya, sometimes you have to choose between being a proud father and a responsible businessman." His choice of words was identical to Stanley's. Tanya realized the two had spoken and coordinated their responses. "Dad, if you vote against me tomorrow, our relationship will change forever." "Tanya, I hope you understand this is for your own good." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The next morning, Tanya arrived early at the company and was met with a surprise. Hundreds of employees were gathered outside the building, not to protest against her, but to show support, holding up signs. "Ms. Tanya, we want you to know we stand by your decisions," said Martha, now the employee's spokesperson. "Thank you, Martha, but you know this could put your jobs at risk." "Ms. Tanya, we'd rather risk our jobs standing up for what's right than keep working in a place that doesn't respect us." The show of support gave Tanya strength to face the board meeting. She went up to the 20th floor knowing she was fighting not just for her position, but for the values she had always defended. The boardroom was tense. Along with the minority shareholders, her father, her 2 children, and employee representatives were present. Stanley had resigned from the board the night before, but made his stance against Tanya clear. "Tanya," began Richard Thompson, "you've created an unprecedented crisis for the company. Clients have cancelled contracts. Our reputation is tarnished, and you still insist on defending decisions that hurt business." "Richard, I stand by decisions that correct injustices. If that hurts some deals, then they were deals we shouldn't have had in the first place." "Tanya, you can't mix idealism with business reality." "Richard, business reality means having competent employees, regardless of their color or background. Idealism is believing discrimination makes for good business." The debate went on for hours. Each board member laid out their position. To Tanya's surprise, 2 of the minority shareholders voted in her favor, recognizing that the discriminatory policies were indefensible. The decisive moment came when it was her father's turn to vote. "Walter, as the majority shareholder, your vote is crucial," said Richard. Walter Williams stood up slowly. At 78, he seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. "I want to tell you all a story," he began, his voice trembling. 50 years ago, I was a poor laborer who could barely read. When my wife left us, I was left alone raising a little girl who dreamed of becoming a businesswoman." Tanya felt her eyes well up. It had been decades since she'd heard her father speak about that time. "Back then, I taught my daughter she could be anything she wanted, as long as she worked hard and was honest. I told her it didn't matter where we came from, but where we were going." Walter paused, looking directly at Tanya. "Yesterday, my 15-year-old granddaughter asked me if I was ashamed of our roots. She asked if I thought she wasn't good enough to work at her grandmother's company." The room fell completely silent. That's when I realized that at some point, I'd forgotten my own values, that I'd let money and status turn me into someone my little girl from 50 years ago wouldn't recognize. Walter turned to the other board members. "I vote in favor of keeping my daughter, and more than that, I want her to implement all the necessary changes to make this company a place where my granddaughter can work with pride." The final vote was close, but Tanya remained as CEO. More importantly, she had regained her father's support and the chance to truly transform the company. In the following months, Tanya led a quiet revolution. She created real inclusion programs, not just policies on paper. She established hiring quotas for Black, Indigenous, and underprivileged individuals. She implemented mandatory diversity training for all employees. Michael, her son, spent a month working as an administrative assistant, fulfilling the punishment his mother had assigned. The experience changed him deeply. "Mom, I had no idea how we treated people," he said after his punishment period. "I'm ashamed of everything I did." "Michael, shame is important, but action matters even more. What will you do to make it right? I want to lead the company's inclusion department. I want to dedicate my career to fixing my mistakes. Rachel also changed. She took charge of a reparations fund, using her own resources to create scholarships for young Black and underprivileged students. Mom, I've learned that doing what's right is far more rewarding than just doing what's profitable. The transformation wasn't easy. Some clients did cancel contracts, but new ones, aligned with the company's values, arrived. Employees who once felt marginalized began contributing innovative ideas, improving overall productivity. Martha, the cleaning staff member, was promoted to General Services Supervisor and implemented a continuing education program for all employees in her department. Ms. Tanya, I never thought at 67 I could still grow professionally, she said, moved. Tyrone, the young IT worker who had provided the recordings, became technology director and created an internal system for anonymous discrimination reports. Ms. Tanya, now we have an environment where everyone can report injustices without fear of retaliation. The young intern who had been barred from important meetings was hired full-time and became one of the company's top executives. Ms. Tanya, you taught me that competence has no color. Today, I can say I work at a company where that's true. 1 year after the incident, Tanya organized a special event. She invited all the employees, including those who had been fired and later rehired after completing the re-education program. A year ago, I lived through the most humiliating and yet most revealing day of my life, she said from the stage in the main hall. I discovered that my own company had become a place I no longer recognized. The auditorium was packed. Employees at every level, from executives to cleaning staff, watched with emotion. Today, I can say our company is a place where everyone has real opportunities to grow, where merit is what matters, not appearance or background. Douglas, the former head of security, stood up from the audience. Ms. Tanya, may I speak? Of course, Douglas. I want to publicly apologize for what I did. The re-education program opened my eyes to prejudices I didn't even know I had. Douglas had been rehired as a security supervisor after 6 months of intensive diversity and inclusion training. Now, as a supervisor, I ensure that every employee and visitor is treated with the same respect, no matter how they look. Jennifer, the former HR manager, also spoke up. Miss Tanya, I was blinded by my own biases. Today, as a diversity consultant, I use my experience to help other companies avoid making the same mistakes. The event concluded with a special announcement from Tanya. I'm proud to announce that our company will donate $10 million to social inclusion programs across the country. We'll fund scholarships, job training programs, and support for entrepreneurship in underserved communities. The audience erupted in applause. But Tanya wasn't finished. And I also want to announce that my father, Walter Williams, will donate his share of the company's profits to establish a foundation in our names dedicated to fighting racial discrimination in the workplace. Walter, now 79, slowly made his way to the stage with renewed dignity. My daughter reminded me of who I've always been, he said, emotional. A man who believes everyone deserves equal opportunities. I'm sorry I forgot that, even if only for a while. The embrace between father and daughter on stage left no dry eyes in the auditorium. Months later, Tanya's company had become a national model for inclusion. It received awards from human rights organizations and became a case study in universities. Most importantly, it became a place where people like Martha, Tyrone, the young intern, and thousands of other employees could work with dignity and have real opportunities to grow. Stanley tried to return, apologizing and claiming he had changed. Tanya met with him in her office but was firm. Stanley, I forgive you as a person, but I can't trust you as a professional. You had 40 years to show your true values. Tanya, you can't throw away decades of friendship over one mistake in judgment. Stanley, it wasn't a mistake. It was a revelation of character. You showed me you always believed I was an exception, not that all people deserve equal opportunities. Stanley left the office for good, but Tanya felt no anger, only pity for a man who had wasted decades of relationships because he couldn't see beyond his prejudices. The biggest challenge came when a multinational corporation approached the company with an astronomical offer to buy it, $3 billion. "Mom, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," said Michael, who had matured greatly over the past year. "But I'll understand if you don't want to sell." "Michael, why do you think I shouldn't sell?" "Because this company now stands for something bigger than money. It represents the possibility of real change." Tanya smiled, proud of her son's transformation. "And what about you, Rachel? What do you think?" "Mum, $3 billion is a lot of money. But what's the value of dignity for thousands of employees? What's the value of knowing we're transforming the American job market?" Her daughter's responses confirmed she had raised not just a better company, but better children. "Everyone, we're declining the offer. Our company isn't for sale. We have a mission bigger than profit." The decision was celebrated by the employees as a victory. They knew their job security and dignity were preserved. 2 years after the initial incident, Tanya was in her office when Barbara walked in with special news. "Ms. Tanya, a letter arrived from the President. You've been invited to receive an honor for your contribution to racial equality in the country." "Barbara, what kind of honor is this?" "It's the Presidential Medal for Human Rights. It'll be presented at the White House." Tanya held the letter with trembling hands. She never imagined her personal struggle would have a national impact. "Barbara, gather all the employees. I want to share this news with them." In the main hall, Tanya announced the honor, but made sure to clarify that the award belonged to everyone. "This award isn't mine. It's ours. It belongs to every employee who had the courage to speak up against injustice, to every person who supported the changes, to everyone who believed we could build something better." Martha, now 69 and about to retire, asked to speak. "Ms. Tanya, I've worked at many companies in my life. I was always treated as invisible. Here for the first time I feel seen, respected and valued." "Martha, you've always been valuable. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize that." "Ms. Tanya, you gave me the most important thing anyone can give, dignity at work." Tyrone, now the technology director, also spoke up. "Ms. Tanya, when I first started working here, I felt like I had to constantly prove I was competent. Today, I know my skills are recognized regardless of my color." "Tyrone, you never had to prove anything. You've always been capable. The problem was some people couldn't see past the color of your skin." The young woman who had once been barred from important meetings, now a senior executive, gave the most moving speech. "Ms. Tanya, you didn't just change my professional life, you changed my personal life. Today I'm proud of who I am and where I work." "Sweetheart, you should have always been proud of who you are. I'm sorry anyone tried to take that from you." The event at the White House was emotional. Tanya brought a group of employees representing every level of the company. Martha, Tyrone, the young executive, Douglas, Jennifer, her children, and her father were all there. During her acceptance speech, Tanya didn't speak about herself, but about everyone who had made the transformation possible. "Mr. President, this award represents the victory of all Americans who believe our color doesn't define our ability, that our origins don't determine our destiny." The impact was nationwide. Other companies began seeking Tanya's advice on inclusion. She founded an institute to spread the practices that had worked in her company. "We want every company in this country to become a place where anyone can work with dignity," she explained in an interview. The institute grew quickly. Within months, it had trained executives from hundreds of companies, always with the message that diversity isn't charity. It's smart business strategy. 3 years after the initial incident, Tanya's company had become the most desirable place to work in the country. She received thousands of resumes every month from people of all backgrounds who wanted to be part of a company that truly practiced equality. "Mum, we achieved something I thought was impossible," said Michael, now the Director of Inclusion and Diversity. "We proved that doing what's right can also be profitable." "Michael, it was always profitable. We just needed the courage to act." "Mom, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, son." "Do you regret facing all those challenges? Wouldn't it have been easier to accept things as they were?" Tanya looked out the window of her office, watching employees of all colors and backgrounds working together in the building across the street. "Michael, do you want to know what the most important day of my life was?" "What was it, Mom?" It was the day I was stopped at the door of my own company. It was the day I realized I had to choose between being complicit in injustice or fighting for change. And wasn't it hard to make that choice? Son, when you see injustice happening, doing nothing is a choice. Taking action is another. I chose to act. Mum, do you think it was worth it? Michael, look around. See how many lives have changed for the better. How many people now have opportunities they didn't before. How many families have been transformed. Does that answer your question? Michael smiled, understanding that his mother had found a purpose greater than profit. Mum, can I tell you something? Of course. I'm proud to be your son, not because of the money we have, but because of what we do with it. Michael, that's the greatest compliment you could give me. Rachel, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward. Mom, I have a proposal for you. What is it, dear? How about we expand the institute to other countries? I have contacts at companies in Latin America that want to implement similar programs. Rachel, do you think our model would work in other countries? Mom, injustice is injustice anywhere, and the recipe to fight it is always the same: courage, determination, and support from people who believe in what's right. Rachel's proposal was approved. Within 2 years, the institute had expanded to 12 countries, always with the same message: diversity isn't a problem to be solved, but an opportunity to be embraced. Martha, now retired, became the institute's ambassador. At 71, she traveled across the country sharing her story with other companies. Folks, you can't imagine what it's like to work somewhere where you're respected for what you do, not judged for how you look, she said in her talks. Tyrone created an app connecting companies committed to diversity with candidates from historically marginalized groups. Ms. Tanya, the app already has over 100,000 users. We're building a national network of fair opportunities. The young executive, now 28, had become the youngest director in the company's history. Ms. Tanya, I want to tell you something. Go ahead, dear. My 5-year-old daughter asked me yesterday if she could be the boss when she grows up. I told her she could be anything she wants, and she believed me. That's what you've given us, the chance for our daughters to believe in themselves. Tanya couldn't hold back her tears. Knowing she had helped a new generation grow up with more self-confidence was the greatest reward she could have. Sweetheart, your daughters can be anything they want because you're building a better world for them. Walter, now 82, remained active in the company. He had become the leading advocate for inclusion programs. Daughter, I know I won't live forever, but I want you to know I'm proud of the woman you've become. Dad, you taught me everything I know about fighting for justice. Daughter, I taught you how to fight, but you're the one who reminded me what's worth fighting for. The company continued to grow, always staying true to its values. It became a case study in universities worldwide, proof that business success and social responsibility can go hand in hand. Tanya, now 63, remained steadfast as president, but had already begun preparing successors. Her priority was ensuring the company's values would outlast her. Everyone, you've built something far greater than just a company, she said during the annual employee meeting. You've created a model for how the world can be better. Ms. Tanya, said Martha, now 73 but still present at every major event, you planted a seed that will bear fruit for generations. Martha, we planted that seed. All of us. Tanya Williams' story became a national symbol of how one person can transform not only their own life, but also the lives of thousands. Her biography, written by a black journalist, became a bestseller and inspired other women to fight for change in their workplaces. But for Tanya, the greatest victory wasn't awards or public recognition. It was walking through her company's halls and seeing employees of all backgrounds working together, valued for their skills, not judged by their appearance. Barbara, she said one morning 5 years after the initial incident, do you remember the day I was stopped at the company entrance? How could I forget, Ms. Tanya? That was the day everything changed. Do you think I made the right choice? Ms. Tanya, have you seen how many families have been transformed? How many young people now have opportunities they never would have had before? How many companies changed their practices because of our example? Barbara, Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just ignored what I saw that day. Ms. Tanya, you're not the kind of person who overlooks injustice. That's why you built a company that changed the country. Barbara, do you think our fight is over? Ms. Tanya, fights for justice never end, but you've shown that important battles can be won. Tanya smiled, knowing she'd found her true purpose, not just building a successful company, but making the world fairer for everyone. End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of Tanya Williams' story? Do you believe she made the right decisions in confronting discrimination in her own company? Have you experienced or witnessed similar situations? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Your story could inspire others. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more moving stories like this one.